Hi everybody, Christopher Wing here, and when I was first planning my trip around the world, I had originally intended to have some stories and anecdotes, behind the scenes trivia and stuff to share with you along the way about the different theme parks and attractions that I was experiencing. Unfortunately, that idea went out the window pretty fast because I just didn't have time while I was on the go to record and edit all of that video together. But now that I'm back home, I wanted to share some of those stories with you, as well as some stories of things that happened to me along the way that I haven't shared yet. So here goes. So as you can see, I've got on my annual pass holder 60th anniversary of Disneyland t-shirt. Disneyland's still celebrating their 60th anniversary right now, but it's not the first anniversary I've been to at that park. I was able to go to the 50th anniversary about 10 years ago, and back in 1990, I actually went to the 35th anniversary of Disneyland, and this was actually a really important one for me because it was kind of the moment where I transformed from being just a kid who liked going to Disneyland into a real diehard Disney history theme park enthusiast. And how it happened was for the 35th anniversary, they were going to have the original three hosts of the 1955 opening day telecast there. That's Art Linkletter, Bob Cummings, and just recently ex-president Ronald Reagan. And I really wanted to go see this rededication ceremony, but it was on a school day. So I had to kind of lobby my high school to let me out of school for the day so that I could go to Disneyland for this ceremony. And they agreed to let me do it on the condition that I write a report about it. So I did, and this is what I wrote. It was called The Definitive Disneyland. I know I really got ahead of myself because, it's only 15 pages long, so it's hardly definitive. But nonetheless, I wrote the report, they let me go, and ever since I've been kind of hooked. As we all know, Disneyland opened July 17th, 1955. Now, some people claim it's the 18th because the 17th was technically a press preview day and not open to the general public, but that's kind of splitting hairs. In any event, if you had arrived when the park had first opened, you would have bought a ticket that looked like this. This is actually a replica of Roy Disney's opening day ticket. You can see the serial number is 00001, and the cost is $1, which seems like an incredible deal. Except that just got you in the main gate. If you wanted to actually ride any of the rides, you would have had to buy additional tickets like these. And each ride had its own ticket booth where you'd have to shell out change. So like Dumbo is 25 cents and the carousel is 15 cents. And then, the Mad Teacups, that's a really pricey one at 30 cents. But you literally had to shell out change every time you had to ride a ride, and this became a little bit problematic because these little ticket booths were overflowing with nickels and dimes and quarters by the end of the day, such that when they had to take it to the bank, they had to empty out the sand from the fire buckets and fill them up with change and then weigh it to kind of estimate how much money they had because there was no way they could possibly count it all. So eventually they got rid of the change and they got the more familiar A through C and then A through E ticket books, and then eventually they got rid of those and got the annual passports, which I talked about in my video on Disneyland tickets. One of the things I love about the original Disneyland is there are those little glimpses into Disneyland's past history still scattered around the park, and if you know where to look, you can actually find some of those original ticket booths scattered around Disneyland even today. I'm not going to tell you where they all are, but if you're interested, there's a really great reference out there. It's this book. It's called Seen Unseen Disneyland by Russell D. Flores. And it's got lots of really interesting, cool trivia about the park, including a whole chapter on where you can find some of those original Disneyland ticket booths. Now, for my trip around the world, I wanted to ride or experience something in each park that was unique, that it was an attraction that only existed in that park and nowhere else on Earth. And for Disneyland in California, to me, that meant the Matterhorn. So the Matterhorn didn't actually open when the park opened in 1955. And originally that spot was just a big kind of pile of dirt. In fact, in this book, Roller Coasters, Flumes, and Flying Saucers by Robert D. Reynolds. Bob Gurr, who is one of the original Imagineers who designed a lot of the attractions in the parks, tells a story, quote, "We always had an area that was in the park east of the castle called Snow Mountain. It was just a lump there. They bulldozed a lot of earth and put a bunch of trees around it. One of the gardeners was growing marijuana up on top and had been growing it there for about a year before Bill Evans, the landscape architect, went up there. He saw the plants and sent a guy over to the local agricultural office in Anaheim. 'We have these plants, dot, dot, dot.' They were removed the next day, so Snow Mountain started out as a marijuana farm. Not many people remember that the Matterhorn was actually opened as part of a tie-in to a movie that Walt was filming at the time called Third Man on the Mountain, which was set in Switzerland on the Matterhorn. In fact, the ride actually opened 4 months before the movie came out. And the ride actually is pretty unique in a lot of ways. For one thing, it's the very first tubular steel track roller coaster in the world. Now, what does that mean? Before the Matterhorn, roller coasters generally look like this. Basically, they're big giant piles of wood, and if you look closely at the tracks, you'll see that they're basically flat pieces of metal that the cars ride along almost like train tracks. Now, when it came time to build the Matterhorn, there was a problem because the spaces inside the mountain were so confined that there were so many tight twists and turns that regular roller coaster track just wouldn't work. So they hit upon the idea of using tubular steel instead of flat steel. That way they could twist and turn the tubular track any way they wanted, and they didn't have to worry about which way was facing up. And this actually worked out incredibly well, so much so that pretty much every roller coaster since, from Expedition Everest to California Screamin' and onward, uses tubular steel track, but the Matterhorn was the very first one in the world. Another interesting thing about the Matterhorn is the fact that the Skyway attraction predated it. So when it came time to build the mountain, they had to leave holes in the middle of it to allow the aerial tramway to pass through the middle. And there's an interesting quote in Marty Sklar. Marty Sklar was the former head of Disney Imagineering for the longest time, and he wrote a book called Dream It, Do It. And he has a quote in here about the King of Belgium. He says, when the King of Belgium visited Disneyland and rode the bobsleds with the Queen and Walt, he asked why the mountain had holes in it. And Walt responded, because it is a Swiss mountain. Now, I always thought that joke was kind of funny and referred to the Skyway bucket holes, but it's interesting to see that the mountain has actually changed a lot over the years and used to have a lot more holes in it. So here's a picture of the Matterhorn more or less the way it kind of looks now. And here's a picture of how it used to look. And you can see that there were a lot more gaps in the surface than there are now. In fact, when it first opened, the interior was pretty much just all the exposed superstructure. There were no ice caverns and there was no Yeti or anything like that. So it's changed quite a lot over the years. Speaking of royalty, my favorite photograph of the Matterhorn is this one. You can see Walt Disney riding in the back, and in the front car is the Shah of Iran and his wife, whose name is Farah Pahlavi. And I love this picture because, I'm not an expert, but it looks to me that she's decked out in probably 10 to 20 grand worth of, custom designed Chanel. And she's about to go on a roller coaster, and I just keep wondering if anybody has told her, A, how violent this roller coaster is, and B, the fact that there is this splashdown at the end, and she's probably going to get a little wet, which I've got to imagine was probably not her favorite thing. Before I leave off talking about the Matterhorn, I wanted to share two more pictures with you that are pictures I took. First, there's this one, which is a picture I took of the Matterhorn probably in the 1990s. And then there's this one, which is a picture I took of the actual Matterhorn in Switzerland. And the thing I love about these pictures is if you put them side by side, you can see that the Imagineers actually did a pretty good job capturing the look and feel of the real Matterhorn mountain. So it's pretty cool to look at. So Disney actually filmed me riding the Matterhorn for the video they put up on Disney Park Blog earlier in the day when I arrived at Disneyland. But when it came time to ride it again, after the clock had officially started ticking on my journey, I found out that the ride was down for repairs. So I had to revert to my backup option, which in this case meant Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Unlike the Matterhorn, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride did actually open when the park originally opened in 1955. But like the Matterhorn, it was also based on a film, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which was released in 1949. That, in turn, was based on a book called The Wind in the Willows, which was originally released in 1908. Now, one interesting thing to note is neither the ride nor the movie nor the book really have much to do with each other. Aside from the characters, the ride has the whole segment where you go through hell at the end, and none of that is in the book or the movie. They just basically made it up for the ride. Now, in my video, I stated that this was a unique attraction, which it is for Disneyland now, but it wasn't always. Back in Walt Disney World, they used to have an attraction, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, that opened in 1971. But unfortunately, it closed in 1998 when the ride was converted into The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and there was much moaning and gnashing of teeth. The Disneyland version of Mr. Toad has also undergone some major changes over the years. Back when it first opened, Fantasyland in general looked very different from the way it looks now. It had a kind of a circusy carnival type of feeling to it. And in 1983, they decided to redesign the entire land, which also meant redesigning the entrance of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It used to originally look like this, but then it was redesigned to look like this, more like Toad Hall from the original story. Incidentally, when I got to Disneyland Paris, some of you may remember I posted this short video, and I'm standing outside a building that looks almost exactly like the Toad Hall that we have in Anaheim, but the difference is, in Disneyland Paris, the building houses a restaurant that serves fish and chips instead of a ride. Anyway, after I got done riding Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, I had to immediately rush across the Esplanade to Disney's California Adventure, which is where I will be meeting you in the next video. So I'll see you real soon.
Hey, before you take off, I just want to say a quick word of thanks to some folks who made today's video possible, especially Alan Huffman and Chris Taylor, who granted me permission to use their amazing vintage photographs of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in the Matterhorn. And a big thank you to Werner Weiss of Yesterland.com. If you have not visited his site yet, you definitely should. It is an incredible wealth of information about the history of the Disney theme parks. And also I want to give a shout out to Jason Kretsch, a friend of mine from Seattle who definitely helped me get started online and got me set up with a lot of stuff. I'm still learning all the time, and I thank you very much for getting me started. He has an amazing blog as well. His blog is projectstickynote.com. You should definitely check that out as well. And finally, if you like this video, please click like, please share it with all your friends, tell everybody about it. If you want to see more, be sure to click the subscribe button as well. And I'm going to be posting more content and blog posts and other stuff on my blog, which is MouseAroundTheWorld.com. So please check that out, and thanks for watching.